This year, Iran demonstrated that this rabid anti-American hostility is alive and well, trying to receive a U.S. visa for one of these hostage takers to serve as their ambassador to the United Nations, to live in Manhattan with diplomatic immunity. Madam President, it was one of my proudest days in the U.S. Senate to introduce the legislation countering this action that passed unanimously through both houses of Congress and that was signed into law by President Obama, stopping known terrorists from entering the United States. When push comes to shove, the American people understand that Iran is our enemy. We need to bring that same clarity, that same bipartisan unity to current circumstances in Iraq. Just because Iran fears the ISIS jihadists, it does not follow that we should partner with them in this fight. The enemy of our enemy, in this instance, is not our friend. If we cannot secure our people absent Iranian involvement, we need to get them out. If we cannot strike ISIS in Iraq without Iranian involvement, then we need to look for another means of doing so. ISIS consists of radical Islamic terrorists who seek to murder Americans. And yet the Iranian regime has over and over again demonstrated the same hostile intent. Indeed, it is the leading sponsor of terrorism across the world. Madam President, it is deeply concerning that not only Secretary of State John Kerry, but also former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel have all signaled in recent days that they are actively interested in exploring a partnership with Iran to deal with Iraq. Indeed, today, President Obama publicly suggested, quote, Iran can play a constructive role. This is the height of foolishness. It is deeply disturbing that so many current and former senior Obama administration officials would share this same misguided and naive view. There could be no more ill-advised or counterproductive policy for the United States at this moment than to partner with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Rather than partnering with Iran, we should be all the more mindful of the dangers of taking our eye off the ball of Iran's nuclear program, as no doubt Tehran hopes that we will in this most recent crisis. As grim as the threat of ISIS is, it pales by comparison to the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran, given their long and well-documented history of state-sponsored terrorism. Indeed, Iran is working now and has been working for years right now to develop nuclear ICBMs for one reason and one reason only, and that is to strike at America and potentially to murder millions of Americans. It would be the height of folly to take any action in Iraq that would further embolden Iran, which is already moving to make Iraq a client state in its pursuit of regional hegemony. We already know how that script plays out. We've seen it in our ally Ukraine, where former President Viktor Yanukovych acted as Vladimir Putin's stooge and planted pro-Russian agents throughout the Ukrainian government and armed forces. But the Ukrainian people refused to accept Russia's attempt to reintegrate them into a 21st century reincarnation of the Soviet Union. They stood up in the Maidan Square, a place I visited just a few weeks ago, and they braved the freezing cold. They braved the murderous army snipers who shot the protesters down in that square and they stood and demanded freedom. They demanded to stand with America, with Europe and the West. Iran, in its attempt to create a modern version, a new version of the Persian Empire, has attempted a similar play on behalf of so-called Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei through the means of the Iraqi regime of Nouri al-Maliki. Sadly, Iranian forces today permeate both the government of Iraq and the Iraqi security forces. America has demonstrated, beyond any shadow of doubt, our offer of liberty to the people of Iraq. Indeed, thousands of our sons and daughters have given their lives in pursuit of freedom in Iraq. But if the Iraqi government is more interested in forging a relationship with Iran than the United States, we should not and we cannot attempt to force them to adhere to our political goals for them. Absent active partners in Iraq who want a closer alliance with America and with our allies, our key objective should be quite simply to secure our people, to counter active terrorist threats to our national security, and to make sure we do not further embolden the Islamic Republic of Iran. These objectives, not the fantasy of resolving the Sunni-Shiite conflict that has been raging since the death of Muhammad in 632 AD, or the illusion that we can magically find productive common ground with Iran, should define our policy towards Iraq. I'd like to make one final note. It is my hope that my colleagues will think more broadly about what's happening in the world, in Iraq, in Iran, in Russia, in Libya. We are being faced with terrible options that have been created by the bad choices our leaders have made. Those guiding our foreign policy at the White House, at the State Department, and even, unfortunately, here in the United States Senate, have refused to address the true dangers posed to Americans at home and abroad. Bad choices inevitably leave us with bad options. Refusing to recognize the radical religious extremism of individuals who are committed to jihad and have pledged to murder Americans is a bad choice. Refusing to utter the words radical Islamic terrorists is a bad choice. Negotiating with terrorists to release terrorist leaders is a bad choice. And considering any kind of deal with Iran is a very bad choice. In the last 5 years, America has receded from leadership in the world. And into that vacuum have stepped nations like Iran, like Russia, like China. As we've abandoned our allies, the consequence has been to make the world a much, much more dangerous place. America's leadership has never been more critical than it is today. And until the leaders of our government stop making these bad choices, we will continue to be left with bad options. Thank you.